Today I'm going to be traveling to Florida and I'm going to try to make my entire trip a tax write-off. And I'm going to take you with me on this trip so that you can see the entire journey for yourself. Because if you watch this video until the end, then you will also have a solid understanding of how you can travel tax-free as well. But first, let me go over the rule I must follow on this challenge, which is simply, okay, I have to make this trip 100% tax deductible, and I'm gonna need to travel, I'm going to need to eat, and of course, I'm gonna need to sleep. So the expenses I take must be qualified tax write-offs and completely legal. So with that, let's talk about my travel plans. But really quick, before I dive in and leave my home, if you're new here, I just wanna say welcome. I'm Sean, an entrepreneur and investor who loves tax strategy and loves building wealth. And because I am a business owner, I'm able to write off my business travel days with some personal days mixed in as well, which I'll cover a little bit later on in this video. Because ultimately, if you are a small business owner, then you get specific tax advantages that other individual taxpayers simply can't utilize. However, if you do have a 1099 miscellaneous income, or you do have 1099 non-employee compensation, or you own a single member, multi-member LLC, or have an S or C corporation, then some of the tips in this video can also apply to you as well. Now, one key thing I want to drive home at the beginning of this video is that planning is essential for a business trip. You should have an agenda, you should have your meetings or events booked before you leave your tax home, because that helps you to substantiate the tax deduction so much better. So with that disclaimer out the way, let's get this business trip started. All right, so today is Thursday and I'm currently on my way to the airport, which brings me to my first tax deduction of the day, transportation. Because on day one of my business trip, I'm able to start deducting my travel expenses, which means I could start deducting my Ubers, my taxis, my Lyfts, or any other forms of transportation from my home to the airport. However, today I elected to take some risks out on the road and have my wife drop me off, so hopefully I make it there safely. But more seriously, although I'm not paying for a service that's gonna drop me off, I still would be able to take advantage of the business miles driven from my home office to the airport using the standard mileage rate, which is still a nice way to start deducting some of my travel expenses. Okay, I'm officially at the airport now, getting ready to check in. And of course, one of my big ticket expenses for this business trip will be the flight. Now, one of the great things about the tax code is the departing flight to your business destination and your returning flight back home are both 100% tax deductible. Now, one thing that people tend to forget are the smaller expenses, because oftentimes when you fly, you have to check in stuff like your luggage. Well, guess what? While you're on business, that expense is also 100% tax deductible. So keep these other smaller fees in mind that pop up while you're on a qualified business trip. As another example, parking, okay? Today, my wife dropped me off, but if I drove myself and parked my car, well, the cost associated with that is about $20 per day, and that would also qualify as a tax write-off as well. And with that, let's get checked in and make our way to the gate. Thankfully, I ate a small breakfast before I left the house, so while these airport food options are tempting, specifically to Starbucks, I decided to hold off on my first meal until my flight landed. And while waiting to board, I thought this would be the perfect time to explain exactly what qualifies for a business trip. The three big rules for business travel are, okay, number one, you should have a legit business purpose for the travel. Some examples of trips would be stuff like traveling for a new business, which includes the cost of scouting new locations, exploring merger and acquisition opportunities, or acquiring a new investment property. And traveling for event purposes such as conferences or workshops where the days of the event are all tax deductible. And traveling for board meetings, even events held at resorts where there's a clear business business purpose and a reason why the board meeting must take place in a different location. Rule number 2, the trip should be away from your tax home. Now, your tax home can get a little bit tricky. What I like to say is your tax home is the main place where you're conducting business and not the place that you're living. For example, if you live in Atlanta but your main place of business is Miami, then your tax home for business purposes is Miami. A good best practice is your trip should be at least 100 miles away from your tax home. And if you are sleeping 100 miles away, then you're gonna unlock a lot of tax deductions associated with your business travel. And rule number 3, you should be working regular business hours, which I like to say is between 4 to 8 hours of actual work and time spent conducting business. If you're just there on vacation having a 30-minute conversation, then it's gonna be challenging to call that a business day. And with that, let's go ahead and hop on the flight. It's also important to note that those are my 3 big rules to make sure a trip is a qualified business expense, but other technicalities can come up, such as your business travel should be less than 1 year because otherwise it's like you're living somewhere else. But on the other hand, you can be on business for 6 months. Now, if you want to make sure you're taking advantage of all the business tax write-offs you qualify for and would like some assistance with tax preparation or tax planning, then click the link down in the description below to learn more about how our team can help. Okay, so I just got out of the Uber and I finally made it to my hotel's lobby, which gives me an opportunity to talk about the logistics of my business trip. So this is day 1, and the cool thing about your first business travel day is that it is all tax deductible, even if you're not conducting business yet, because the IRS understands that, hey, traveling can be exhausting. So get there, get checked in, and then be prepared to handle business the next day. So I have nothing else big on my agenda but to maybe check some messages, relax, and of course, get something to eat. Speaking of food, let's talk a little bit about lodging, meals, and per diems. I think you're gonna find this part super interesting. So a per diem is a fixed daily allowance rate established by the federal government to reimburse employees for various expenses when traveling, such as lodging and meals. Now, business owners cannot take advantage of the per diem rate for lodging expenses, but they can take advantage of the per diem rate for meals. Now, usually when you're trying to qualify for the meal tax deduction, you have to be having a business meal with someone else. But when you're traveling, you can have that business meal alone and then use the standard per diem rate as your tax deduction. You can find the per diem rates by state by going to the GSA website and entering in the state that you're traveling to. Now, the interesting part is that even if you don't spend up to the per diem rate, you can still take it as a tax deduction. For example, if the standard meal rate is $69 per day, but I only spend $50 per day, I can still claim the $69 as a meal and take it as a 50% tax deduction subject to the IRS limitations. On the other hand, if I'm spending more than $69 per day, it makes sense for me to actually expense that and then also claim that as a 50% tax deduction. In either case, it's super cool that you can write off your business meals, have it alone, and then deduct 50% of the cost. Now, tomorrow is Friday, which will be my first official business day, and I have a meeting, I have an event, so it should be fun and productive, and I'm looking forward to taking you with me. On my agenda for today, I have to travel to 2 business locations, so I jumped into the Uber and continued deducting my transportation expenses. At one location, I met with my real estate investment partners where we had a tour, discussed my investment, opportunities we currently saw in the market, and we did an interview discussing real estate tax strategies. Of course, in between all that, I had to eat, so I continued to take advantage of the standard meal per diem to get a satisfying lunch. Then after my meetings, I made my way back to the hotel and successfully concluded the business day. Yesterday was a jam-packed day full of many things happening, and I'm looking forward to sharing it on the channel, so make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already. But for now, today is Saturday. As you can tell, I'm near the beach, and I think you're gonna love this part. So since I have more business activities planned on Monday, then guess what? I get to make today a personal vacation day because if weekends and holidays fall in between a day devoted to business and it would be impractical to return home, then those days still count as business days. Meaning the tax code allows me to deduct all of my out-of-the-pocket expenses for lodging, meals, transportation, and tips, which is an amazing hack to be able to mix some personal days with some business, and timing it like I did allows me to enjoy this weekend tax-free. Now, I'm curious, have you ever done anything like this before? Tell me down in the comment section below if you've been able to add some personal vacation days to your business trip. I wanted to quickly share that I'm using my business credit card for all of my transactions, and there are a few reasons why. Okay, number one, using my business credit card allows me to take advantage of some unique benefits such as hotel and travel protection, along with being able to earn points and cash back. So I'm definitely taking advantage of that. Number two, when I use my business credit card and I make purchases, later on when I pay that off, I'm building up my business credit. So that's another huge benefit. And then number three, and maybe more importantly, using my business credit card allows me to separate my business transactions from my personal transactions. So when it's time to file my tax return, I have all the tax deductions I can take on my business credit card. And the IRS does accept credit card statements to be able to document your tax deductions. So that's a plus as well. Plus, it helps me to stay organized and prepared when it's time to prepare my own tax return. So those are some of the reasons why I love using my business credit card when I'm on vacation or just having different business transactions. I wanted to share that with you as I continue to enjoy my personal business day. During my last business day, I made my way to another location where I attended an event to discuss business and real estate with some other savvy investors. At the event, there was some private networking, breakfast, and an exclusive Q&A with the event host before we headed to the main stage where the workshop was taking place. I stayed at the event for about 5 hours, ate lunch, and decided to make my way back home. So I jumped into the rideshare, got changed, and made my way throughout the airport. And during the day, I continued to use my business credit card, recording and documenting all my expenses so that I could later take them as tax deductions, which, by the way, if you have questions about anything, make sure you let me know. Then of course my wife picked me up from the airport and I successfully concluded the business trip with some personal days. All right, my business vacation trip is complete. So now let's go through a quick recap of the schedule so you have some ideas on how you can implement something similar. So Thursday was a travel day, which, remember, a travel day is considered to be a business day where the expenses are still tax deductible. Then Friday was a legit business day where I conducted business for several hours. Then Saturday and Sunday were more like personal days where I didn't need to conduct business as long as the weekend fell between another business day. And although I did come back earlier, Tuesday could also be considered a business day since that's a travel day back home. So I hope you appreciated the video. Let me know down in the comment section below if you like this style and want to continue to see me do these types of videos. Also, don't forget to click the link down in the description below if you need help with tax planning. Coming up next, I have a video where I tried to write off everything for 24 hours. So check that out if you haven't already. And I'll see you over there.